Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for tuning in to Forward with Balance. My name is Sam. As usual, I am your host, and I am joined today with, someone so special. You guys have no idea. I went to school with this motherfucker, and I'm just excited as fuck. One of my classmates, his name is Shane Hanssler, audio engineer, is joining me today from Nashville, Tennessee. How are you doing, dude?
Doing good. You know, it's been a long week, but we're here.
Yeah.
We're having a good time.
We are indeed. We were chatting a little bit before. What were we chatting about, Shane?
The vaporizer that is actually in my hand.
I was gonna.
Well, that was part of it, at least. We were talking about how it's something that it's nice. You kind of enjoy doing it, but at the same time, you know it's not good for you.
That is true. We were chatting. I think I remember why I was going to go off on a little bit tangent. We were chatting about vapes. We were chatting about how there's nothing like a good vape. You can get your fix of nicotine by those little pouches that you put in the corner of your mouth. You can get your hit off nicotine. You could take a blunt that has nicotine in it, but that's going to get you more stoned than anything. Or the difference between like a good bowl, a good joint, a good cart, all these little ways of ingesting the same thing, but in different ways. And it made me think, man, that's kind of reinforcing to me, at least as like a small artist that's getting my sound, quote unquote, under my belt a little bit. Like I should not worry about going after and being somebody else entirely or mimicking somebody else. There's pros and cons to doing stuff like that, but you should kind of be glad that you can't do the same thing that somebody else can, even if you tried. You have a unique spark that makes your stuff you.
Without a doubt. Yeah. No, I mean, I've seen that a lot for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
You get like a million people that come through the studio and you never expect what you're going to see until you see it. And then you're like, actually, that was kind of cool. That was extremely different from the last dude that I had here. But like, that was sick.
One of these guys, his name was DNA Picasso, came through KMG at one point when I was interning there. Dude came in, kind of introduced himself and said, okay, guys, we're going to get out of here for a second while the session's still being paid for. He goes out to his car, smokes up. I have no idea how godly amount wise he did. And then comes back and proceeds to write an entire song from scratch and record it.
Yep, that's about right. Well, I mean, have you seen like the mumble rap approach to everything too?
I have not.
Okay, yeah. So like, imagine his approach was sit down, write the entire song. And a mumble rap approach is we're going to go one line at a time. I'm going to make it up on the spot and we're going to write an entire song. And just based on that, we're going to hear it. If it sounds right, we're going to keep it. If it doesn't, we're going to scrap that. We'll go back a line. I want to hear the whole thing again. And then I'll go straight in.
I actually did this recently for the first time. I don't know why I'm saying this as a precursor, but I didn't research any kind of videos. I didn't have this as like an experience thing. It was just more of like a feel. So I had my client Chef Burn out here over in the booth. We were doing more or less like his first freestyle. So I came up with a beat on the spot this day. Just got like a decent 808 drum beat pattern. Felt it out. He comes on to the beat. He gets in the booth and we actually start doing that very same thing where he says a line, kind of mumbles it out, and then we just keep going back and forth, back. And I noticed I had to put a little bit of pressure on him. So as soon as he stopped and as soon as he fucked up, I run it back very quickly in order to like get him into the zone. And from that little bit of a push, I got results from him. And he actually ended up writing out this really cool verse. And I was like, yes, like that made me feel good. That made him feel so good. He was on cloud 9.
Yeah. So like what a lot of the people that I work with that are on that similar frame, I'll always tell them to start with the hook. Like, here's something you've never heard before. Like maybe they have heard it. They might have brought the beat in and they've practiced some stuff over it. But I'm like, what is your hook? What's going to make this the song? Because most people don't remember the words from a verse. They might remember a word or two from a verse, at least on the first listen through. But when you hear a hook, you're going to hear the hook 2 or 3 times. So I'm like, so what's the drawing factor for you? What is going to make this song the song that people are going to remember the rest of the words after they remember the hook the first time they hear it?
Right.
And so I would always skip past all the verses and I was like, we're going to start here. This is your chorus, your hook, your whatever you want it to be. And I'm like, and some people even make their bridge their hook. Like it can be the line that draws you that is like, I don't know, like Red Hot Chili Peppers do that really well. Yeah. They have like some little thing that leads you into the chorus, and that's the part that people remember more than the chorus. which is kind of rare, but it happens.
That wouldn't be called the pre-verse? Or
I
sorry,
mean,
pre-chorus, I
it's
should say.
pre-chorus, but they'll call it a bridge,
Interesting.
which is it's funny because it's when the music changes completely. It's what takes you from one part of the music to the next. It's
part
a bridge
A to part B. It
Yeah.
bridges the gap between A and B.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
see what
So
you mean.
there's a line of what a pre-chorus is and what a bridge is. A pre-chorus is typically when you remove things from a verse.
Okay.
Like
What do you mean remove things?
So it's like stripping down a verse.
Okay.
So your verse will be like your drums, this specific melody, this specific sound or whatever it is. And then the pre-chorus, they take out the drums. And then they start to build up with the same sounds. They add a different set of drums, and then you hit the chorus, and there's something new added, things taken away, whatever it is. Whereas Red Hot Chili Peppers like to do this thing where they change the music completely in this little pre-chorus attempt, but it's a bridge. It's this gap that is filled with a different style and flow of the music before it goes from verse to chorus. And so like that always was such a cool idea to me. I was like, yeah, you don't have to have a pre-chorus. You need to have a bridge. You need to have something that takes people away from what they already know to then take them to something else they don't know.
I got to listen to more Red Hot Chili Peppers in order.
Well, I mean, like, like Snow, they have that like very distinct guitar parts, like yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they break into chords. They don't actually keep that playing all the way through.
Okay, yeah.
And then they break into chords, and then you're like, oh, that's gone. And then they take those chords into the chorus. And
so I always thought of it as just like one thing, which is like what you were basically talking about, the bridge between the verse and the chorus. But I didn't know that you could go about it different ways, even though that doesn't necessarily surprise me. There's a bunch of ways to like break the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like a lot of when you listen to pop has a pre-chorus. It goes into like a settled down thing, and then they do some drum build that takes you to the chorus, and then you do the same thing with the next verse, and then you go back into the chorus, and then they do a bridge. And the bridge is like your I'm like trying to think of a good example. Billie Eilish, the song Bad Guys.
Yeah.
Or Bad Guy, whatever.
Yeah.
It gets to that point, so it's like very consistent structure, and then it gets to that one point where everything drops out and it's just a bass.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And that's her bridge.
That's part C,
if
you will.
Yeah. And so that's her bridge. But there's a lot of like math rock bands and different types of rock bands that actually incorporate the bridge into their pre-chorus version of things. But I think we got sidetracked on what the idea of this whole thing is, but it's really just understanding the balance between what is necessary and what isn't necessary. Yeah.
I told you it was coming.
Yeah, the balance. Yeah. So yeah, it's really just knowing when you need to do certain things for what you're trying to portray as the song. And so for having like someone who's just freestyling, it's like, is it necessary for us to have you do a full verse, or are we going to break away from this for a second so that that chorus or that hook hits a little bit harder than it did?
Right. It's all about impact, right? I heard that recently out of another podcast. No, actually, it wasn't a podcaster. It was that guy Venus Theory that I sent you a video of. If you haven't checked out Venus Theory on YouTube and you want to really like dive into some of the more deeper ideas of music, and have somebody kind of explain that to you in a very unique way, check out Venus Theory. But he was explaining to me impact in songs, and it was something that I really had kind of not really thought about, I guess, if you will. I didn't understand all this time throughout my musical journey what it was like to actually like resonate with the audience, whether that be through the instrumentation or the lyrics, or being able to draw attention to the song by taking elements away, reintroducing them in a new way.
Yeah, well, and so one of the biggest things that I learned in Nashville was it's a statement that every single session player will say, knows, it's like ingrained in their brain, and it's, you are not playing for yourself. You are there to serve the artist, and you are there to serve the song.
I like that. Okay.
So it's an idea of understanding what the message of the song is, and
The story,
sitting
if you will.
so far in the back of what that story is, but
Mhm.
helping guide it.
I feel like okay, so I should probably make a little tiny sidetrack here. This conversation has a tendency to just like kind of go off of whatever topic we have. We don't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
necessarily have a set topic. However, the thing I wanted to say is like I feel like you have an ego. Everybody has an ego, right? But
Yeah.
that ego gets in the way of some things, and I feel like that would be something that the ego does, at least for me, get in the way of. Where in my musical journey currently, I don't want to necessarily be in a band or be tied to another artist because of creative differences, and I want
I
to be
think
able to
that's
have
where it's the best though. So the ego is it gives you it gives your song a personality.
yeah.
So like to have an ego going into the writing process of something,
Mhm.
it's knowing that whatever you say should be heard. It's whether or not people listen to what is stated. So working with an artist, obviously, if you get hired by that artist, you're not
Mhm.
going to be like, yeah, what I say goes. It's like, no, what you do is you put creative input into what their idea is
Mhm.
so that they almost have the idea themselves.
Okay. So,
So,
like a little bit of influencing.
yeah, it's like putting your ego, in a sense, into their thought process.
Mm.
So, like, give them a reason as to why you want to do something and allow them to turn it into what they want, but it still allows you to have your input and your kind of like process put into the song.
We're still talking about being a session musician, right?
Well, that's just in general, I
That's just a
think,
part of it.
like production,
Yeah.
artistry, writing the song, whatever it is, like any section of it, because like there are probably 6 major sections of writing a song. And so it comes with A, an idea, B, writing out the bare bones, like whatever the lyrics may be, or the hook melody or something like that.
Could we call that pre-production?
Yeah, it's pre-production. Um, I think even that isn't pre-production. That's almost just like,
Foundation?
yeah, it's a foundation of an idea.
Sure.
And then you get into pre-production and it's how are we going to build this idea?
Yeah.
What genre is it? What is going to make this feel the way we want it to feel?
Okay.
And that's when you get into the pre-production.
Mhm.
Then you get into production, and that's kind of where it gets into the clash.
Yeah.
That's where your egos hit hardest.
Give me an example.
So I had one person that was like, really wanted this song to be acoustic. And I understand that because the song was essentially is about coffee. So
Is this other person like the idea?
she was the artist.
Okay.
So it was, her idea was, it's a song called Caffeine.
Nice.
So when she perceived it, it
Mhm.
was a song about being in like a, I get, yeah. Just like a coffee bar. So like imagining like your coffee style music where there's one dude in the corner that's just playing a guitar and singing things. And so that was her approach. But then I opened up her mind to the idea that yes, it is this coffee lounge kind of feel, but what we're actually writing about is emotion.
Okay.
So
The emotion associated with being in that scene?
yeah, so she was explaining love as butterflies or caffeine, and she wasn't sure if it was this scene of am I feeling butterflies or did I just drink way too much coffee and I'm just having a conversation with this person and I don't know how I feel about it. And so I was able to be like, yeah, so let's take that acoustic approach to like what a coffee lounge is, but also realize that it's emotion. And so we add these elements that are emotion and they aren't natural because what you're feeling is like unnatural in a sense. And so that was where it led to like me putting my ego in a sense into her song.
Got you.
Yeah.
I like that. Because with all artists, they want to have their idea come across. Like they want to have this major main bubble as the song. However, I feel like in this vast ocean of ideas we got and these vast amounts of infinite possibilities that we can choose from, it becomes a little overwhelming at some point if you can't just hunker down to one idea. Having said that, because you're hunkered down to one idea, it's kind of hard for you to see differently, if that makes any kind of sense. Like where you can't see outside of the bubble because you're in the bubble.
Yeah.
So having outside influences like a producer or a co-writer, some people, like I know a lot of pop producers use ghostwriters and they make the lyrics for them. They sing it and make that their song, quote unquote.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with that, I go back to the simple statement that I always say with music, and it's a point of collaboration. It's balance. Ha. So yeah, no, it's collaboration. Every like culturally, music is a collaborative thing. So you look back to the most like basic terms of what music was, and it was like drum circles.
Yeah, that's how it
And
first started.
yeah, and so you look at what really was collaboration, and it went further than just the music itself. It was the dance, it was the show that went along with it, but it was emotion. And that I always am like, yeah, it's emotion, but it's emotion.
I like that.
So it's collaboration through emotion. So you're telling a story through a collaborative sound, but each person adds their own piece to that story so that that motion of emotion is actually, it makes sense.
That gives me an idea for a song in itself. The idea would be human beings have this unique way of working together. We have this unique way of absorbing the things that are going on around us. Because for me, after this very intense mushroom experience that I've mentioned on the podcast multiple times, and I've told you, where on my 22nd birthday, I took this brain looking like fungus, ingested it, and it really changed my life in a lot of positive ways. Damn it, I lost what the fuck I was saying. But anyways, human beings as a species have this unique way of like working together and seeing the world. So I view us as like an observer. We take in things, and especially for artists, even more so, we observe the world around us. We observe the emotions going on inside of ourselves, and then we spit it back out in this like weird conglomeration that we call art. And it's like a testament to working together with your fellow man, also your fellow species members on this earth, like, and the earth itself. It's like a giant collaboration, and
yeah, well,
it's beautiful.
It's like a secondary form of conversation.
Absolutely.
It's so as I've gotten further into the music, it's kind of like it's its own language in a sense. So to have that conversation within what you're doing from one person to the next, it's really just like not only having your part in the conversation and stating something, but also you have to listen in order to actually demograph the right thing that needs to fit in that conversation.
So the right thing is very subjective because everybody has their own unique way of defining what the right thing is. But what would you say the right thing is in this example? Where it comes down to
noticing your place in the conversation.
I like this. Okay. Yeah.
So like I think that's demonstrated really, really well with drummers and bass players.
Absolutely.
So either a bass player is going to be extremely active in a song, and so is the drummer,
bringing more attention to them.
Yes, or and at that point it's the groove. So it's a song that's bouncy. It's meant to have a lot of like lower end things that add a bounce to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there are other songs where you still have a bass, you still have a drum, but they are so minuscule in that conversation because they knew that they didn't need to hold a big part.
Mm-hmm.
They're more there to draw attention to the primary aspect of that conversation, which is either what's being said or the sounds that are kind of drawing emotion to your ears.
So for me, that looks like the drummer, or let's say like a hip hop beat, right? Where the drums are usually very simple. They're not overly complicated, and they're usually in a pattern that repeats throughout the majority of the song, right? That's not going to change. Therefore, you tune it out after you listen to it for a while. But because you tune it out, it accents the main melody, and the main melody accents the vocal. bringing the entire thing together in a unique way.
Well, and so when you get into like hip hop beats, that's where you get into so psychoacoustics can go into multiple facets of that statement.
For the audience, because I know that we are all
Yes.
just joining, what does psychoacoustics mean?
So psychoacoustics, that is such a broad definition. But psychoacoustics goes anywhere from using sounds to make something sound louder.
Okay.
So like people will add certain tonality to basses to make it sound like it's blowing out the speaker, and
Like
it
a
sounds loud.
like a high hiss, if you will, to the
Yeah,
background of it. Yeah, for a
yeah.
bass.
Yeah, so like that bass, it's like whatever, and it just sounds like it's exploding your speaker.
Yeah.
And so that's part of psychoacoustics, but another part of psychoacoustics is this idea of repetition.
Mm.
So when a sound is repeated over and over and over again, you get to a point where your brain recognizes it and ignores it.
Right.
And so with hip hop, you really love the beat at the beginning of the song. And you're like, that's why I'm listening to this song.
Yeah.
It's because I like the bass and I like the beat.
Mhm.
But after about 8 to 16 measures, psychoacoustics of your brain tone that out because a new part has come in and you're familiar with something.
Gotcha.
And so now you're paying attention to all the things that are unfamiliar.
I see what you mean. That is, thank you so much for like kind of explaining that, because I learned something out of that too.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your main point going off of psychoacoustics?
So psychoacoustics, just like the conversation point, it's knowing what your point in that song is and point in that conversation is. Are you there to accent other things, or are you there to be a highlight? So psychoacoustics, repetition allows for other things to stick out.
So because you mentioned that this is more of like a language in a lot of ways, if you kind of think about it, but as looking at like an actual conversation, it ties into this. I read this book with my co-host on my other podcast, Sam and Chef Burnout, and I read this book called The Celestine Prophecy. And I've probably brought it up to you a couple of times, but in this one instance throughout the book, they really draw attention to conversations and the energy between people when they're having a conversation. The example was 3 people were talking about how to storm this like base. In the story, they were talking about how to properly storm this like base. And the main character was noticing that one person would basically like hold the ball of the conversation, right? And then naturally pass it off to the next person. And then that person would naturally hand it off to the next person. But it was like a flow between these people that's unsaid. And it's the more that after that point when I read that, the more I notice it between people and the more in tune that I can become a complimenter or the attention bringer to myself.
Yeah, and I think at that point it's like passing the ball is adding a perspective. And so it's here's a primary idea. And now that I've laid out this primary idea that we have, what do you have to say about that idea? And then the next person's like, hey, well, this is a great idea. However, here are the plot holes. And then the next person who gets the ball is like, those are the plot holes. This is how we smooth it. And so it's like, I think my favorite, the best way that I've heard that explained in music is, I guess, like in hip hop, you've got like one bass note or like 2 little things, but it usually accents right at the beginning. So it's like letting someone speak and then the bass comes in again and it's kind of like an approval.
Mm.
So like you get that 2 bass notes and that's like someone saying, okay. And that's what it's like the audio version of saying yes.
Call and response.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So someone's like, I want to have a good time, but not for a long time. And then the bass is like, mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
cool,
but that's kind of like the conversation of music. It's like know what your part is. It's like know when to say okay and know when it's your time to like lead the conversation into the next point.
Okay. So I got a question for you. If one of our audience members, for example, Or to just be touching their toes into like the vast ocean of music. What would you say is a good way for them to listen and
To
understand?
listen,
Maybe not listen per se. I should say to find out where their piece is. If they don't know where their piece is,
I
I
would
can't give it away.
say, from what I've learned, just knowing that less is more.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So leave the space until you know that space needs to be filled. So to listen is to understand what space you're working with. And so that's that first person laying out the idea. So if the first idea that you're laying out is this really cool drum beat, maybe the next thing you do is put the lyrics on it and then see the space you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you don't know what you have to fill until it's there. And I've gotten to the point where I've made a lot of things, so I know how to create space for that person, but like it's really easy to have a drum beat with a single droning note that goes right underneath it. And that's like a really good baseline of space, is that single sound that floats underneath it all because it is your space. So create the space, create the rhythm, and then allow the next piece to fill its own space the way it wants to. And that's really good. Like it's really easily done by vocals. Or if there's no vocals, it's a melody. And what's going to fill that zone? Um, but then also, once you've done that, even if you started with your, drums, weird drone sound, and a melody, it's knowing when to take that melody or certain things away when more things are added. Listen to when things have to be emphasized.
It also, the visual picture that I'm getting is almost like a highway where you have two end lines and then a divider that is like right and left. It divides left and right, and you're filling the space in between with sound. Whether that be a vocal melody coming straight down the middle alongside the bass, having like a melody on the right side and not on the left side, or having a single melody. And for those of you out there that are actually technological or not technological, but technical with audio engineering, you use like a doubler in order to like fill that space even more. Or one of your favorite plugins that I know you still use to this day is Wider.
Less and less every day.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
It depends on what I'm doing. But
Obviously.
yes,
but
I still use it.
But like using these tools that we have at the end of the day in order to make this thing what we would call like a sausage using compression. You fill this space until it's thick, right?
Until you feel it's full enough. Yeah.
That I should probably rephrase into that. That's perfect. Yeah, until it's full enough for that message to come across the way that you want it to.
Yeah, like I've listened to people that are very minimalist.
Yeah.
There is a bass line, there is a drum, and there is a melody with the voice, and it's 4 layers the entire song.
More times than not, I feel like songs like that create more of an impact to me personally.
It gives you more to think about. It creates more space for thought. And I think that's key. There are songs that make people think and they draw an image. And there's a lot of artists that do that extraordinarily well. But then there are a lot of artists that create songs with so much space that it allows you to think, create.
Like, I want to kind of rephrase this to one of my favorite video games when I was younger. It was called Vanish. And it was a scary, scary game because you were in the sewer systems and there was only limited visibility in front of you before it was complete blackness. And because of your imagination going wild and creating scenarios like, oh my God, the monster is going to show up at any minute, it became more scary. But flip that on like a different approach, which is like music. You allow their space for the audience to have that reaction and that creative, like, because like the conversation that we were talking about earlier, it's a conversation between you and the audience. Without you really knowing it, you're coming up with like one side of the conversation. And then for them, their part or them taking the sphere is to listen to it and have an opinion based upon it in a way, or have thought evoked because of it. And that's like their side of it in their way.
Yeah. Well, and like, I'll give an example, like Emancipator. He is a spatial genius. He will literally put you in this zone of thought. And there is a single word, which is the title of the song, that you are provoking your thought around. But you don't really, there's not really like one right answer to what that thought can provoke. Whereas, your pop artists are telling you what you need to know. And even in that, a lot of them will keep it vague enough to where you can write the story into your own life.
Yeah. One song that I very much resonated with, and I feel like it, in a lot of ways, helped to push me into the direction that I'm currently at, is a song by Eden called Rock Plus Roll. I love this song because of the ending lyric. I bonded so tightly with it. It goes, "The more you know who you are and what you want, the less things upset you." And that might be right to some people and it might be wrong to some people, but for me, it was right. And I really started to go down this path of understanding myself because of it, because I didn't want to be as angry. I was very angry at that point in my life. I was angry at the world. I felt betrayed in a lot of ways. And because I had this one thing that I can constantly come back to and feel like I was being understood in a lot of ways, or some way for me to, as they say, like self-project onto that idea. It became one of my favorite songs of all time because of how tightly I related to it, how tightly it resonated with me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I kind of forgot exactly what I was going off about, but to kind of like have that as an evoker of emotion, there's nothing like it because people resonate with it. That's like the tightest way that I know for a person to like really like your song is if they can like understand you and put that other side of the story together in their
Yeah.
own way.
Well, and I've always looked at it as like, how vague can I make this in telling you who I am? Because the right way to look at someone is that they always change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've always said it's kind of like, it almost sounds negative when you say it, but I mean it in the most positive way. But the more you know, the less you care,
That's fair.
because you start to learn a lot more about a single thing. And then you're like, oh, okay, so it's not that bad, you know?
Yeah, actually.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I've always seen it, is like, the more you know about somebody, the less you really care about everything else. And so it's like there's finite details that you might not like about someone, but the more you get to know that person, you're like, that doesn't matter though. And so same goes with music. The more someone tells you, it's kind of like, well, now you told me what I'm supposed to know, and it's not as cool. You're like, I wanted to create like my own idea of this construction that you have made yourself.
This honestly reminds me a lot of what I think about when I think about dating. And the in the most related but unrelated thing, for at least this is the thing that I've heard the most of. It's like leave some things up to a mystery when you're first like getting to know a person, because that draws in their attention. They're like, well, who are they? What are they about? And if you give all of that up right away, it kind of defeats the mystery. It kind of defeats like a little bit of the adventure into knowing that person, if you will.
Yeah, and it's almost like the less you know, the more you discover together. So I think that's also one thing. Like I would say you and I could probably agree with it. You don't know everything about yourself, nor does the person you're talking to. So the less you know about them, the more you get to discover together about yourselves.
Because with another person, especially, there's things that people notice about me that I didn't notice about myself all the time. And at first, when I really was young, I was self-conscious about it because I was like, I don't want you to know anything that I don't know myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have an edge over me. I don't want you to like have something to hold over my head or something like that. But then as I got older, more matured a little bit more, I started really realizing that it's a blessing to be able to engage with other people and have that as an option. You can engage with it or not. You can tell somebody to shut the fuck up, or you can like honestly listen to them and take that as criticism.
Yeah. Well, I told you something that I started doing a very long time ago, and I was doing the approach of Sundays are for listening.
I've been recently taking that and implementing it more.
Yeah, and it's actually the best way to approach everything. Because if you ask a broad question, you never know what the answer is going to be, but it's so much more fun that way. So, like, that can go with anything, you know?
Podcasting, for instance, I have broad questions all the time, and people are often caught off guard because they
Yeah.
don't know what to say. But if that's part of the fun,
But it sparks.
exactly.
And so, in that process of asking that broad question, they learn a little something. And it might be about themselves, or it might be about the person who asked the question. They're like, wow, that was a deep question. Holy shit.
Right.
And then other times it's like, yeah, no, like, I guess I do agree with that. And, you know, they start to learn something. And a broad question allows you to learn, but also them to learn. And that is like why listening is the most important thing.
That's why I kind of gave it away earlier when I asked you that question. I said listening instead of the other thing, but you're right. In a lot of ways, I want to say KMG. In the era of me being at KMG, I really started to pick that up, especially hanging around you, my man. Like, for the audience out there, when I was at KMG, I'd always go over to Shane's place and we'd make music. And I
Lot of
learned
music.
so much. I learned so many cool things. I learned about Ableton. I had learned about what we were talking about earlier, which was like space and where I fit into this like whole conglomeration. As I think fondly about those memories, they provoke more and more thoughts today because of these experiences that I had.
Because
Like,
you listened.
because I listened and took that in.
Yeah. Well, and it's, you start to take things to heart, right?
Yeah, I love those memories, dude. Those
Yeah.
were fun. Like I look forward to engaging with people in the creative aspect because of that.
Yeah,
Whether it
absolutely.
be artists that are digital artists or physical drawing types,
And
tattoo
that's
artists.
like right now, new job, got the new job. I'm
Congrats.
not fully in music,
Yeah.
but what I've been able to do because I have this new job is I don't charge my artists. We come up with some royalties agreement. I make their song and I put faith in them.
That's cool.
And that's kind of like my approach has been, it's, you want this so badly that I have faith in you. So what I'm going to do is we are going to come up with a creative process that works for the both of us. We're going to get something done and you do with that what you please. But I'm putting faith in you. Like it's the Jesus take the wheel kind of approach to making music, because you don't need to have a right or wrong answer to a song. It's really, and in this day and age of music, it's presence. How active are you within your community? How much attention do you draw to yourself? And how much do they appreciate what you say in every song you release? And so that's why I work with the people I do. It's because those people have some level of like ambition about them.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I trust that I can make something with you and you will take it beyond the finish line.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, I won't charge you. We'll sit in my room for 4 hours. We'll make this thing. I could be charging you hundreds upon whatever, what the industry standard of charging people is. I'm like, but no, I'd rather just listen to what you got to say. And I enjoy making music. So since it doesn't weigh me down at this point, let's make something that is so cool that someone has to listen.
You're acting like the best, smoothest catalyst, in my opinion.
That's the idea. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But it's when you start to work with a friend and not as a client to whatever, it's natural. And that's when you get the best work done.
Two things. One, would you like a quick plug? Shout out to Shane Hanssler in Nashville. If you're in the Nashville area, please hit this motherfucker up. He will make you sound awesome. Trust me because I trust him.
And if you want to look me up, I go by just kidding. It's Will Devised.
There you go.
Yeah, so I go by Will Devised. That's my production shebang. It's fun because not a lot of people know me. And when they do and they don't, they will approach me as Will. And
that's true.
And that is always the most fun experience because someone knows me as Will and I'm like, yeah, sure.
I know where you got that from.
Yeah.
Second thing is, me and Dan were actually talking recently. I got together with him and we had a couple of beers. And we were having a very similar conversation, or I brought it up mainly, where I was talking about I'm getting to this point now in my production phase where I'm not really paying much attention to it because it's not necessarily in this stage gonna be the end goal. There are things that I have to do, like work, in order to put money into it, in order for it to actually explode. Right? That's the mature thing to go about it with,
Well, it's just
or one
understanding
way.
that the industry doesn't move a million miles an hour, though it does.
Hmm.
People don't blow up overnight. People don't just create one thing and it's big. No, they created 500 things to make that one thing that became big. It's not an overnight explosion.
So glad that you said that. On Sam and Chef, me and Chef talk about this all the time, and I've been preaching to him so much whenever he needs to hear it, and he tells me this exact same thing. It's like Ed Sheeran at one point on a newscast said, "You really have to let the dirty faucet run to get the black, dirty, nasty water out of your system. So you have to write. You just have to make stuff." And I kind of knew that this would come back around, but that's one of the reasons why I'm not really trying to make this podcast of mine perfect right now. One of those reasons is because I want people that are all along this journey with me to see that you don't necessarily have to break your back in order to make something perfect. You just need to release it. And by releasing it and making it constantly, you will get better as a consequence.
Yeah. So I recently heard it. Well, heard a quote. It's one of my buddies quoted this, but you play as a pawn until you become a queen.
I love that.
So just be a part of it until you make yourself across the board, and then you get to move a lot more directions.
That's a really good one. I like that. Shout
Like,
out to whoever said that.
yeah, we won't drop his name.
No.
That's actually going to be a lyric in a song, so I can't drop names yet.
We are not going to drop the name, but that person, thank you so much for telling that to Shane,
Yes.
who told me another thing, just a side topic, but yesterday, actually, I had this conversation with Chef. It seemed like he was, me and him have been both a part of this spiritual journey, if you will, like whatever you define that as. We just define it as our spiritual journey and growing and getting better and taking the little things that life throws at you and starting to turn those negative things into positive things. I'm really starting to understand, and I felt that he was starting to get more and more overwhelmed with the spiritual journey because it's not easy. There's going to be your ups and downs. There's going to be really, really bad times, and there's going to be really, really good times.
And then there's the times you hit a wall.
That too, where you really don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And those times, I feel like another person really helps me personally, but for others, it might be going for a walk, going for a hike. If they're up against a wall with like music, for instance, as like our example, go for a walk. Your mind is, I actually got this for Rick Rubin and you. I got this from you first, and then Rick Rubin's book kind of accented it, but your mind will subconsciously work on a problem without you knowing it. So that's for instance on like how to get through a wall, but
so another thing is to notice what a wall is. Walls have ends and walls have heights. So A, you're going to climb the wall, or B, you're going to see how far around you have to go. And if you choose to go around it, you ended up changing your direction. So do you end up walking so far that you ended up, the wall ended and you just were like, actually, I'm going to keep going in this direction because in the process of walking around this wall, I found something better.
Fuck, Shane, I love that you brought that up. You knew me from a point where I was just starting to get into audio engineering. And I remember telling you at one point that there were 3 other people in my class. There was you and 2 other people, and I was comparing myself to you guys. And I was like, I know it's not something that you should do, but I was. And I was like,
it's good though. Healthy competition.
My direction changed because of it. It went from how am I going to be quote unquote better than these guys with my ego to how can I get the same result in my way? And I started to really just start working harder at the things that I could. I studied harder. I came back and practiced, and God damn it. I'm sorry. I forgot what the hell I was going to say.
It's okay. Hey, well, let me draw from that. I have been surrounded by some of the best, biggest people that I've always been like, wow, how do I get better? Like they are steps ahead of me. And I'm like, okay, so do I need to get steps ahead of them, or do I need to just get on a different plane where I stay beside them? And so they might be higher up, but I'm still next to them.
It's like the saying, shoot for the moon, but you'll still end up among the stars.
Yeah. And so maybe some dude land on the moon. Fuck it. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
But like,
you'll get there eventually.
Hey, I'm on the star that's like three to the right from you. Like, that's cool.
And you wouldn't have gotten that far if you hadn't chased them.
Yeah. If I hadn't, no, just no. Chase is a stretch. Cause like, yeah, you can chase people and that's cool. Like, that's the idea of looking up to somebody. And that can go as far as your favorite artist.
Yeah, or your friend.
Yeah, but your friend is just someone that you have a really close reference to because they also haven't made it yet. So it's a really good perspective point for you. Like, you watch them making bounds and you're like, wow, okay, so they did it. They did something that's substantial. I'm like, okay, so what did they do? You know, and like you get to see more of those little stepping stones versus just looking at, you know, Bruno Mars or whatever it is, you know, and you're like, yeah, dude, he's just so good. He didn't try that hard. He was just that good from the beginning. Like, no, he took the same steps.
Two things. One, the first thing I don't want to forget is how I ended up becoming a podcaster and off of the wall and taking a left. Second thing is going off of what you just said about, what the fuck did you just say? I'm so sorry. I'm flabbergasted right now.
I'm just curious to hear why you became a podcaster, so I'm cool with that.
It was going to tie in, because of the journey of me becoming a pod and the relationship that I have with my audience, not only on the podcast, but with Twitch and my music, is I want to release these steps for them. It's kind of like a roadmap, if you will, because I don't have any control over who listens to my stuff. And those people that I'm grateful enough to have listened to me, I want to give them a service of some kind, like just out of the greatness of my heart. I want to show them like, this is what I did. And you can follow these steps or go left or right, but this is the roadmap that I took right in front of you. And hopefully it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think steps are to be taken with a grain of salt because some steps make you slip and some steps take you forward. But like, I don't know, like the same step that I took won't be the same step that the next person took because there's a million other steps that happened before that took you to where you currently stand.
And if you showed where you slipped, then that person's going to avoid it.
Yeah, well, and that's, I think that's huge because the reality of learning is failing. And so to explain a failure teaches someone about a failure that they may not have to experience ever. Yeah. And that creates balance.
There we go!
Hey, that's the key word right there.
He knows how to push my buttons.
Yeah.
All right, going off of why I got into podcasting, I was an intern at KMG, and this guy named Il Gates came and did. Do you know Il Gates? He came and did a workshop, if you will, at KMG, and I was there to kind of run the board and learn as much as I could because I was like, that was the benefit of interning there. So he said something that very much resonated with me at the beginning. The very, very end of 2022, start of this year when I started the podcast. It was accountability. And how you keep accountability, because I've noticed I'm very much the idea guy in a lot of ways. I have a lot of ideas, but to actually implement them is a different animal to me. It might be like the weakness, or it might be the strength in some circumstances, but regardless, I went to my co-host at now, Chef Burnout. He was my first client. I even remember telling you and Evan when we were in KMG, like, hey, I have my first client. And we stuck together ever since. And I was just
that's that ambition though. You saw the right person and you're like, he's gonna go for it, and so you stick.
And we stuck together and we helped each other out until it's not much, but 3 songs worth since the beginning of the year is still a lot compared to the person who only releases 1 for the entire year. So I know that I believe in him a lot, but before I really started to see what he was made of, it was all talk. And we would talk a lot. We would talk like you and I talk. And that's special. To talk in depth about ideas is very much something that's like a value to me.
And going back to your statement of like going on a spiritual journey, I think a lot of that spiritual journey is bringing ideas into existence.
Oh, I love that. That's an entire topic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just like to talk with someone for 10 minutes about one idea is bringing an idea into existence. And that is when your subconscious starts creating reasons why you're doing that in the back of your mind. And so, yeah, cool. Sorry.
You're good.
Continue.
You're good. So me and Chef were talking over the phone a lot like this. It was to the point where he wasn't like super serious about it. And one day he came to me and was like, dude, we need to record what we're saying. This is good stuff. Like the ideas that we're drawing from the ether and bringing into reality is not going to stick if it's just between you and me, as well as if it was actually here and in the physical, really manifest into like an audio recording or like a video. But the same that way that we were just talking about, like bringing those ideas into the ether is something that Rick Rubin says in his book, which is if you have an idea and you don't implement it, then that idea is going to manifest in somebody else because it's that idea's time.
Yeah. Inevitably, it's going to come up at
But
some
you
point.
can do it in your own unique way.
Yeah.
So
Which is why a million people have the same idea and they do it differently.
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And people get so stuck up on it because they're saying like, oh, it's the same thing, like the same chord progression as like a pop artist. Like how many freaking chords are repeated in pop music is ridiculous. But it works. It evokes the emotion. Sorry, a little tangent, but he talked about starting this podcast with me, and then we just started. That was at the beginning of the year, January 1st, 2023, and here it is 9 months later, almost 10. And now I have
entering
two.
the 10th, yeah.
Entering the 10th, and now I have two. He has the one that he does with me and his own one. And it's cool because we even talked about this the other day because we're very meta. He can go and explore ideas on his podcast and experiment around with things and learn from it, and then we bring it together on the Sam and Chef podcast where it's refined, and that's like our big baby. That's like our very big passion project.
It's hashing out ideas essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing what sticks.
Yeah. Well, you can throw a bunch of shit at a wall, but it doesn't all stick.
True.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like that has been the only way I've done things. That my newest idea, I'm not going to explain into detail of what that is, but bringing this into the universe, I'm trying to create quote unquote free shows.
Free shows.
Yeah. So shows that no one has to really pay for, and the artist will still get paid. And so that is a stretch of an idea that has a lot of moving pieces that needs to take place in order for it to work. But I know in due time it will work. It's just, the idea is out there now, and I have to figure out how to get it to the point where it works. Because I'm going to tell you right now, people buying out tickets and shows ending up being $300 for a show, not it. It's not what it was supposed to be. It's not what it's going to be. It's not going to stay for long. So I've had a simple idea that could work really well or could flop, and I'm okay with that. But
Gonna learn at the end.
Yeah, it just comes down to people that are invested, essentially. And that's why we work for what we work for. It's to see the people that are invested.
Building that relationship with other people that you don't know is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, it's always been around, obviously, but like, it's just such an interesting thing. And the more that I get into it, the more it changes, if you will, in my own perspective.
Well, I mean, it comes down to it. I'm like, I could very much say that I don't know you the same way that you don't know me. And that's like a beautiful absence in itself. Like, I can still talk with you every day. It's not like an issue. We can have a good conversation, but like, you don't have to know every detail of someone's life to be like, yeah, I know that I like this person on the other side of this. And so I think that's the key to the whole thing. It's the more you know, the less you care. The more you know is nice. And it gives you perspective into why you enjoy minimal conversation, whatever that may stretch to be. but it's also just like, yeah, I don't need to know much more than what I do to be content with where I'm at with this.
I agree.
But yeah,
Let's do a quick time check really quick.
yeah. Like wherever we need to be at. I think we're probably
We're about an hour-ish in.
okay. That checks out.
Oh, here's something that I thought that you might enjoy. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Have you heard of this guy named Andrew Huberman by chance?
Andrew, no.
He is a professor of neuroscience at Stanford, and he has a podcast of his own. I believe it's called the Huberman Labs podcast. And he talks about different things that affect the brain as well as behaviors. And I very much enjoy it because it's more factual than anything. You just have the plain facts instead of like an opinion. And he started talking about cannabis, which I listened to. And he put something in perspective for me, which is when you ingest cannabis, what actually happens to your brain is that it puts your brain into something called divergent thinking. Divergent thinking you could think of as the grabbing ideas and seeing what sticks to the wall. The idea, like plane. Have you noticed that by chance, where you have more ideas when you're under the influence?
Personally, for me, it's more directed ideas.
What do you mean?
So I am very much ADD friendly. So in that sense, I will have a million ideas that brush through my head at any given time that I will just like, yeah, that we're gonna go with that, and then I'll forget them 20 minutes later.
Same, as you've noticed throughout the entirety of this podcast.
Yeah. And so it'll go anywhere. But I feel like the moment I get to that, let's say that enlightened state, I reach a point where it's like I get to one idea and I know it's good.
Yeah.
So I stick to it and I can hold on to that idea for hours. And that's more where I get to. It's not like throwing different ideas. It's knowing that it's a concentrated idea.
So this is while sober or while under the influence?
Under the influence.
Okay, interesting.
So under the influence, I think my brain slows down, which allows me to be like, this is okay. Yeah. So you just chill with it.
Absolutely. So kind of going back to why I brought this up in the first place is when you, according to Mr. Huberman, when you go and ingest cannabis, it launches your brain into what's called divergent thinking mode, which for some people might vary because every person is different. But for me, I've noticed it launches me into that like idea mode where I'm constantly coming up with different fresh ideas that might have been there in the past that I remember, or new ones that combine it. The second part of this is when you come down from your high and cannabis and when you're sober, you are in what's called convergent thinking mode, which is taking those ideas and bringing them together into something different, or seeing what stick to the wall and making something from it. And I thought that was so interesting because I never had that perspective from like the actual science perspective of what cannabis does to a person. And to be able to kind of see that as context influences my thinking about it. I've had a rough, rocky relationship with weed. And for those of you listening, yes, I have. You've noticed at the beginning of the podcast when I started saying I'm a chef, I was going on my tea break and I said that I'd do it for the entire year. I said that I'd go off weed and stop smoking weed for the entirety of 2023. Didn't happen. I made it 2.5 months before I finally broke. And you know what? That's okay.
Which is good.
That's okay.
I mean, I moved to a state that it was illegal. Let's call it illegal.
He's using air quotes for those of you listening.
Yeah, I'm like, let's say it was illegal. But it's not a legal state to smoke in. So I went in there and I was like, you know what? Let's go with a clean head. 4 months, clean head.
Congrats.
And I just sat in it. There was like, they have this thing there that's called Delta 8, 9, 10, whatever, just whatever it is. It's Delta. It's THC, but it's not weed. And so let me tell you that when I smoked the Delta for the first time, I was like, this is awful. And like, to those of you that think that that is a good thing to smoke, it's not natural. It doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel good.
Okay.
And so I smoked that and I was like, I am definitely making the right choice here.
Yeah.
He like
Right?
reinforced it. And I did that in probably the first 2 months, 3 months, maybe. I
Yeah.
smoked that and was like, this is awful.
Yeah.
And so I did that and then I smoked regular weed again. I was like, you know what? Actually, this is okay. But
Good
I do
old
it.
Mary Jane.
Yeah, but I do it in like such rare increments now
Yeah.
that when I do it, let me go way back into this conversation where I was
do it.
talking about collaboration.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing was self collaboration.
Okay.
So I create full ideas in a sober state of mind. And then I take that idea where I've had 5 or 6 beers
Yes.
and I edit that idea. And then I go into it with another state of mind. I get a little bit high and maybe there's some beer in there. Who knows? It's okay. But then I change it again.
Yeah.
And there are so many finite details, but that were so influential in that song or whatever it was that I was doing that made all the difference. Like it was understanding each portion of my thoughts that created this final product.
So interesting. I love that approach to it because we all know that you go into a different perspective when you ingest a substance, either that be caffeine all the way down to hallucinogenics. But to approach that in an artistic way like that, because I know that it's different, but like I think of that as such an artistic way of going about it, like taking substance, changing your lens, if you will, viewing it in a different light, making tweaks because of that change.
Well, and like your drunk sense might just be like, wow, there's a lot of noise there, you know, and it like sober you didn't listen for the noise. It was listening for just getting everything laid out into blocks where it sounds good in blocks.
Yeah.
And then drunk you was like, oh, there's noise there. And like all of a sudden you remove the noise and you're like, it's better.
Do you ever come back? Well, obviously you do because we all get sober eventually, but you ever come back and see what drunk you did and agree with it or disagree with it?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Well, that's part of the collaboration. It's the ego approach. And so each version of you is lesser and more of who you are. And so like your ego takes over more and takes over less. And so when you make that change, you're like, yeah, this is good. I made this change and it was very good. And then there's other parts where you're like, that was a good attempt.
That was a good try.
Yeah. Yeah. And
good try, drunk me.
Yeah. But it then draws another idea. So then sober me is like, oh, but that was the right approach. Like I found the right area. There was a problem area and I tried to do something. It didn't turn out right, but we can do something with that.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, yeah, it's like bouncing ideas back and forth with yourself.
Dude, I've been, without saying it, obviously I feel like we're all in this like changing motif that we are in of doing that, where we take an idea, make a change to it, come back to it. It could be as simple as yourself, your own attitude towards other people. It could be something more specific like music or something like art. But I feel like because of this things relatively to everything else, it's a core aspect of life. It is the human experience, I feel like, is more of doing an action and seeing the results of it. And then because you have nothing else to do, either abandon that idea, say that it's finished, or to continue working on it and improve it further and make more changes to it until it's completely unrecognizable from the thing that you're currently doing. And I've been taking more and more influence from this very thing by going out into the woods and doing your approach, where I go and record sounds. I went to Mount Falcon recently by myself and I heard crickets and I was like, ooh, that's a cool sound. I wonder what kind of like droning idea that would be in a song, or what kind of weird sample that I could make or sound that I could make by throwing it into sampler and then turning it into like something you could play on the keyboard.
Well, and it's almost just like in that sense too, what you're listening to at that time drew something from you.
Indeed.
So then throwing it into something else, it's like, why did that draw something for me?
That's a great question. You know, I feel like that's not a question a lot of people ask themselves.
Yeah, like why did I appreciate this so much? You know, and I think it's when you hear crickets, there's an absence of something else. And that is why you appreciate certain things more, is because of the absence of extra things.
I guess I could say the reason why I like to go on hikes is because it's the absence of a bunch of people in a constricted area like the city. It gives me a second to, I guess I could say, clear my mind, if you will, or to allow that absence to give me a different perspective. I have a really good epiphanies when I go on hikes, and that's why I like them. They affirm things like my appreciation for living in general, the beauty that's around me.
And it's the absence of social structure, I think, is really huge, because we've created such an insane structure to what is right, what is wrong, what is humanity in its presence. So to step away from that completely, it's cultural. Like, all of our ancestors from X, Y, and Z years ago, like hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, they didn't have technology. They didn't have lights, flashy things, all these sounds, all these things that they had such immediate accessibility to. So to immerse yourself into what was the past brings out so much more thought than just accepting what your day to day is, because that's what it is.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That's another thing that subconsciously I've been experimenting with is I've had more of an appreciation now for the past. Really drawing back to like the first thing that started off was there was this website that told the entire history of electronic music. It started out at the very bare bones. We were talking about stones and sticks and how that started all the way down to the theremin, I should say, the theremin, and then everything that came afterwards. And I was in amazement. I was like, we've come so far. These things that I have
crazy
at my fingertips are insane because
Mhm.
of the difference, the contrast between what was and what is. It's
The
a
fact that
great
you can
way.
push 3 buttons and all of a sudden you're playing a cello, it's like, oh, I don't actually know how to play this instrument, but I've got this instrument.
Or a saxophone, a horn,
Yeah.
all of these things. It's insane.
But and then that also goes into the fact that I can talk to anyone anywhere in the world at the touch of a few buttons.
That too.
And it's like, it's not just music. Music has come a long way for sure, but like accessibility to basic conversation. Like, I'm not saying that Americans need to learn more languages, though we probably do. A lot of people know how to speak English. So you can reach out to just about anyone in the world at any time and be like, so what's your perspective? No one does that at all. No one does that enough, at least, to where it's a thing. But like, you have that ability.
I feel like podcasting is promoting that way of thinking more and more because of the Zoom capabilities that we have. It might not be the best, and it definitely doesn't share the same energy.
No.
It definitely does not. There's a different energy between me and Shane now than if me and Shane were to be doing this over a Zoom call. And that's half of it. This was the other half of the perspective that I was going to offer. Because we have all of these things at the touch of our fingertips, it also leaves the other side of the sword where you have that person at the touch of a button anytime you can call them, but you don't. I've noticed that I do that sometimes with people. I let relationships go. And it's more of like, I know that I can get in contact with them, so I'll let it go longer than if I didn't. And if I were to be thinking about that person, maybe for a prolonged period of time, and then the conversation is much more rich after that time has passed. You grow, you learn, you come up with different perspectives.
So I had like this concept come up. Shout out Noah. He and I had a conversation recently about just dreams and dreamscapes.
Sweet.
In general. And so they have been mapping dreams recently.
So
I
like this conversation.
Primarily, well, there's actually a group that is mapping DMT trips.
I was literally about to tell you about that. Yeah. Okay, I'm glad you know.
So they've been mapping DMT trips, and they've found that people end up in very specific places.
Yeah.
And they have been able to actually create a map out of mental whatever capacity it is, but like people have been in the same places. So then we backtrack to dreams, and we've said, like, we were able to even come up with a few scenarios where he and I had like similar dreamscapes.
I can agree to that.
Yeah.
Or attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I added to that, and I was like, there's also a statement where the faces that you create in your dreams are strictly based on faces that you have seen or experienced.
Correct.
And I told him that you're more likely to see your friends and certain people in that. And it's not because you saw their face, but it's because you felt their energy. And they're able to create a vibration that your brain reacts to.
I
And so they
totally love that.
become so much more prevalent within a dream than just a face.
Yeah. So, what do you have to say about the unfamiliar entities?
Unfamiliar entities.
So, I don't know if you've ever had this, but in a dreamscape, did you ever meet or engage with someone or something that was foreign to you where you've never felt that energy?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's like, have you ever fallen in love with someone in your dream?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So I've always seen that as like that is a past life.
Oh.
It's the vibration of an ancestor that has experienced this very specific person. And maybe the face is made up, or maybe it's the face of the person that existed. So you know them even though you don't know them. And that's why, like, I guess creating that relationship with them in your dreams is so simple because you do know them. It's someone that is so close to you without being close to you whatsoever.
That kind of gets my heart pumping for like harder for some reason, like, and a subconscious like reaction to what you just said. I feel like, and this is just me projecting. I like the little stack. This is just me projecting, but I am in this point now where I crave love.
I
Like
get that.
I
Yeah,
want,
yeah.
but like a specific love where I want a relationship with a female. I
Okay,
want a
yeah.
girlfriend.
Yeah.
There's another side of me that's saying no. And that other
Sure.
side is saying no because of excuses. Honestly, at the end of the day, they're excuses. If I really wanted to go after a relationship and pursue it, then I would. But for right now, I'm not because I'm telling myself, you have so many other things on your plate. You have your mother that you are helping out.
I think it comes down to the mission. That's your mission. You have so much more to prove. So why slow down?
Yeah. Yeah. That's basically what I'm telling myself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, and that's the mission. So your mission is to accomplish something. And you don't want to bring someone into something that you haven't accomplished anything in.
Right.
So you're on the path of why would I slow down now when I am just speeding up?
Well, there's the other side of it, which is why do you have to slow down at all?
Well, you don't, but you got to find the person that helps you speed up.
It's true.
And that's its own question. Like you're not trying to slow down, you're not trying to hinder yourself from this acceptance or whatever the hell it is,
Right.
But you might just not be there yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing that no one understands. It's there are people that were ready for it and people that have done it and people that are in it. And that is its own side of winning. They were ready and they're already there. But there are people that have aspirations further than slowing down and being ready to be where they're at. Because there are so many people that don't know where they're at. And so it's so key to just know that because that causes more confusion to accept that you're not where you want to be than to accept that you are where you want to
That's powerful stuff right there, my man.
be. Yeah.
That's powerful stuff because to be able to say that you're not where you want to be takes a certain kind of thing. You know what I mean? A certain type of, some people call it maturity,
Yeah, sure.
right? It's just a word, but it talks about the same thing, just like people talk about. You're good. Nice. We're going to sample that. Just like people talk about God in different religions, but they're basically talking about the same thing in a way, right? And to talk about this level of like maturity, if you will, and saying, I'm not ready yet, but I will be. And I'm going to be getting myself ready for this thing that is hopefully inevitably going to happen if I put in the time and effort into making that thing a reality, which is for me a relationship, you know, that I can
You long for it, but you're not sure what that means.
also to be able to understand what the idea of it is. Like when I first started having girlfriends, I didn't know what love really, or at least it was different than my definition of it is now, what love is.
I would love to hear what you have to say. I've got my own, but everyone has their own. So
Absolutely.
hit me with it.
I want somebody that can help me grow and I can help grow. It's like the picture of two arms watering each other. That's what right now I want. And because I want it, because it works with what I'm doing, which is the mission, which you mentioned earlier. I don't necessarily want to slow down. There's always a sacrifice to everything. Obviously, you're going to have to put some of your time into this relationship, and that time takes away from other things that you could be doing, relationships that you can be, you know, um, up, not updating, but like investing into projects that you can be investing your time into. But I want this person to be someone I can come back to with all these things and that can help me in one way or another with their own perspectives.
It's literally balance.
That's 4. This is a new record.
Yeah. So it's balance. But I mean, that's the only way I can explain it as. But
Yeah,
for me, it's knowing when to slow down.
that takes a lot.
100%. So to see that you're in a situation that you're ready for it
Mhm,
is one thing.
mhm.
But to know that you are moving forward, but they are as well, it's taking one person's time with your own and also holding yourself to a standard,
Mm,
because slowing down doesn't mean you're stopping.
mhm.
Slowing down means you're taking a breath.
Right,
So,
right.
like, knowing that you can be with that person and it's like, cool, we can have a date night. We can have these things. And you're allowed to come over. But while you're over, I have 4 things I have to get done.
Right.
You can sit in, you can be a part of it, and you can be happy with these things. And I'm happy to share these things with you. And I think that is my approach to it now is as long as I'm happy to share my growth with you, I hope that you're willing to do the same.
Right.
And I think it's that little bit of, I don't want to say the word, but it's cooperativeness.
There we
Like,
go.
like saying that you and I are working together to create something that is better for both of us.
Right.
But you also have to recognize that I'm doing 10,000 things at the same time, even though it only is 2. I'm thinking about every step so that I can make those steps and just be like on a plane where you can both be understanding that, like, yeah, your time is yours, my time is mine. But when we intertwine those, that's when we get to take a breath.
On that, I'm going to bring it back to the Celestine prophecy because it talked about that too. It talked about energy between two people. And the reason why some relationships fail, I'm not going to say most, I'm going to say some because,
Say like 50%.
yeah, that's basically right. But some people put their entire energy into that relationship, whether it not just only be with like another person, but it could be with a substance or it could be with a friend. They put so much energy into that thing that they basically deplete their energy reserves
Mm-hmm.
and they have to start taking energy from the other person in order to get those energy
Well,
reserves filled.
that's the difference of how you know you are in love with someone and just toleration. If you're putting up with someone and you're putting energy into someone, that's tolerating.
Without getting any back.
Yes. It's the bucket theory or cup theory or whatever
Okay.
anyone wants to put out into it. So you
Like
have
the
to
half
empty.
full one?
So there's a monk that always said,
Love
in
it.
order to grow, you need to empty your cup.
Mm-hmm.
So that requires you to forget things from the past. That requires you to forget things that you held on to in order to move forward.
Holy
And
shit.
so with that, when you're with someone else, if your cups are both half full, you should both be filling your cups and be able to, share in each other's transfer. So
Right.
like now our cups are 3/4 full from the other people that surround us, but of those 3/4 full, I share 25% and they share 25%. And then you can empty together. So then you take yourself back down to half and you can fill up again. But then it's a meld more than anything, because that 25% that you share might save. So then 25% of the 50% of both your cups, you both share. And so it's this idea that's kind of stretched in the sense of you share everything. No, you don't share everything. You're just aware of everything that they are going through.
Yeah.
And that's where your breaths have to come in, because you have to both realize when you need to take a breath.
So for me, when you say breath, it comes across as like going for a hike and refilling your cup in a way.
Sure. It could be a hike. It could be as simple as just a Netflix night.
That too.
Take a step away.
Yeah.
Like, you've worked so hard for a month.
Yeah.
Take one day to just do absolutely fucking nothing. And nothing is so much more than doing something that day.
Right.
Because the next day, you are so much more driven to do something else.
Taking a break.
Yeah.
For giving your mind a chance to recharge in a way and come back fresh.
And not enough people do that.
No.
A lot of people don't sleep the right number of hours. A lot of people, yeah, you don't sleep enough hours. You don't drink enough water. You drink too much coffee. You drink whatever. You are taking in too much from other people's bullshit, and
that's a big
also
thing.
not being able to reciprocate.
Right.
It's overloading yourself on externals, and that is, again, toleration. You tolerate what is going on around you, but it's the moment that you realize that it's you above everything else. It's not selfish. It's I'm not saying the word. It's
oh, please, come on.
It's balance.
I'm not going to do the thing this time.
No. But it is a balance. It's really just understanding when you're willing to give your all and when you're willing to step away from your all.
Yeah, it is a balance. Mr. Shane, we've been talking about all kinds of crazy things for the past hour and a half.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm feeling pretty good. Do you want to continue, or should we just end it here?
Let me take 10 seconds and think if I have anything else I could add to this. But yeah, no, it seems pretty good,
sir. While you do that, I'm actually going to run to the restroom really quick.
Hey, go right ahead.
We're probably going to edit this out, but if I don't, I love y'all.
I couldn't think of anything.
Any plugs that you want to do?
No, I mean, I could drop names, but we're not going to drop names. That's not as fun. We'll drop names shortly.
We will be dropping names shortly.
I've got a few people that I'm working with that are doing stuff and things and stuff.
We're going to be looking forward to these things and stuffs.
But yeah, well, I'll show Sam these, and he can approve or disapprove of future drops.
They'll come out on my non-existent blog. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap, sir.
All right.
Thank you, dude, so much for coming and doing this. I
appreciate it.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this in the first place with you is because we have such good conversations, such very filling conversations, and I always forget them, so I wanted to have a way to come back and listen to them.
No, I get that. No, I appreciate you having me on here. This was a lot of fun.
It was indeed. Until next time, and it's going to be a lot different next time you're on.
Oh, without a doubt. Next time I'm on, we're going to have like Billboard shit.
Yes, indeed.
I was on Billboard. Fun fact.
Shout out. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, was on Billboard like 2 weeks ago.
You want to plug the thingy?
I can't. Weirdly enough, we can't find the article ever again.
What?
I have video proof that I was on Billboard, but I have no proof of actual Billboard article.
You know what? They say pics or it didn't happen. In this case, vids or it didn't happen. So I believe you.
Yeah, we won a song contest. That was cool. Did the thing.
Oh yeah, I did see that on Instagram.
Yeah.
Congrats, by the way. If I didn't already say it before, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, we did it.
Woo! Woohoo! Well, here's to more. Here's to growth. And for those of you out there, stay creative, my friends. I will see you in the next episode. Peace out, Shane.
Peace.